Hey there, folks. You're listening to Screen Watching. We're fresh-faced. We're bleary-eyed for the final podcast of the year. But we've got more podcasts. It's just the last regular podcast of the year. Simon, I've never felt more alive. Folks, this is Screen Watching.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher! Mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Folks, this is Screen Watching. My name's Dan Barrett, joined by Simon Foster. If you're new to the show, and gosh, I don't know, first of all, where have you been all my life? Second of all, this is what we do here. We talk about things on the screen. That's the movie screen. That's the TV screen. That's the mobile screen. That's the screen that you look at when you're at the shopping center and you got your groceries going past. It's going beep, beep, beep. And then you're looking at the sign telling you about your flyby points and whatever else. We talk about that screen. In fact, 2024, we're mostly focusing on that screen. But for the moment, it's TV shows, it's movies. Simon Foster, how the hell are you doing?
Well, we do all that talking about screens. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Screen Watching, episode number 153. What we don't usually do is talk about it this early in the morning. We should put into perspective exactly why you sounded so a little bit out of it in that opening introduction. We got our times wrong. It's 7 a.m. here in Sydney as we record this. What?
Simon, what's all this we business?
I know. When I say we, I mean me. I'm an hour earlier than I thought I'd be. So we're both literally out of bed. Not the same bed, just literally out of bed. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, I like to think that the two of us live a life like the Three Stooges. So we both got out of the same bed together, and like we took off our long nightgown and our hats
and our sleeping caps. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
And here we are doing a podcast. Yes. But yes, we do have a very busy show this week. We're checking out a couple of the two biggest films of the year with Poor Things and Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, which goes on nearly as long as that title. And then we've got a fun intermission. There's plenty to talk about.
Excuse me, there's some other titles in here as well. Let's not lose sight of the forest through the trees, or however that phrase goes. We're also going to be talking about the movie event of the year, which is Sydney Sweeney and Anything But You.
Oh, dear.
Like, that's important. I'm going to be talking about a film, like a movie, a feature movie called Society of the Snow. It's a Netflix original, so it is made to be watched on your television screen at home. And what will you see on your screen when you watch it at home? You will see a recreation of the same story that we saw in the movie Alive all those years ago. But boy, is this film something.
Is it a Christmas movie? Simon, a lot of snow in there. It sounds very Christmassy.
It is very Christmassy. I mean, there's the society and it's the snow and it's lots of, carols. And
I hope there's elves.
Ultimately, it's about a group of friends who get together for a meal.
Oh, wow. Okay. Can't wait for you to improve on that. Okay. All right. Well, we should get going. We've got plenty to talk about.
Look, folks, it only goes downhill from here. Let's go straight into the reviews.
It stinks.
I am Bella Baxter. I'm a flawed, experimenting person. I seek outings and adventures. Bella's so much to discover.
You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen.
I am finding being alive fascinating.
Bella.
Why I keep it in my mouth if it is revolting? I must go punch that baby.
One of the more impressive accomplishments in the cinema world this year is Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things. This is the movie that stars Emma Stone as Bella Baxter. She is a woman who begins this film as a fairly simple individual, a simpleton, I guess you could say, and then grows into a woman completely on her own terms, all of which sounds very straightforward. And there is one thing this film is not, and that is straightforward. Poor Things. I came out of the movie having watched this film, and I thought, if Tim Burton had matured and fulfilled his potential as a dark storyteller, this might have been the film he made and won all his Oscars for. Instead, Lanthimos, the Greek director who did Dogtooth and a couple of other very weird films, The Killing of a Sacred Deer and The Lobster, he has created this bizarre Frankenstein-like fantasy story, which is perfectly timed to work its magic on society. Look, let's have a look at a clip first, and then we'll come back and have a bit of a chat about it.
Okay,
So
Simon,
what you
before
say
we
in
have
that-
a bit of a chat about it, sorry.
Yes, dear.
Before we have a bit of a chat about it, Simon, I just want to pull you up on this Tim Burton analogy.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't
I
really
thought
understand
that might
why that's being made, because if you think about the idea of, oh, here's the latest Steven Spielberg movie, but you know what? If George Lucas hadn't really sucked for the last 30 years and maybe he'd made this, like, I don't see how that's really that
You are
relevant. It's
going
one master
way
versus
off
another
track.
master. Why must you take men and compete them against each other?
I'm not competing. We've had the same discussion, and you've said yourself that Tim Burton hasn't made a decent film in 25 years. And I'm saying that if he had grown as an artist, as a storyteller, and expanded upon the sort of school diary sketches of his early films, which were wonderful, but he hasn't, this is what it would look like. It has that sort of mentality. Let me explain why.
Just a fun thought, Simon, before we get too much further. Just referencing Tim Burton, I will actually be talking about a Tim Burton movie I watched during the week, which I'm going to say is his last good movie.
Wow, God, okay. Can't wait to see what that one is. All right, so in Poor Things, we have Willem Dafoe as a sort of twisted mad scientist who has come across the dead body of Emma Stone. She has suffered terribly at the hands of the patriarchy of a society that doesn't want anything to do with her creativity, her joie de vivre. She throws herself off a bridge. The body is retrieved by Willem Dafoe, but the young woman is pregnant. He can't save the baby, but he can save the baby's brain. He puts it into the dead body of Emma Stone. So this woman literally has the mind of her unborn child to work with. So she's a fully grown woman, but completely robbed of all the intelligence and all the social cues and mores that she's brought up with. So it's literally a fresh slate for her to start with. She goes out into the world, stolen away by Willem Dafoe, by Mark Ruffalo's, I guess he's a bit of a F-boy, he's a bit of a player, but in that very sort of ruffled shirt and cravat kind of way. And all the while she is learning about how to behave in public. But in this instance, it's totally on her own terms. She can't see, she's not sort of forced into any of the societal standings or societal expectations with which she grew up. She's just this woman growing up on equal terms with everyone around her. She speaks her mind, albeit in sometimes a pidgin kind of English. So it's literally a Frankenstein story, but told from the perspective of a female, a woman trying to grow up in this very sort of buttoned up society. It makes for an incredible story. It makes for a very dark, often gruesome story. This Frankenstein doctor does a whole lot of things, experiments which are quite awful. But it ultimately emerges as this really rousing, not so much a feminist parable or a feminist sort of storyline, but just about how an individual can put behind them all the really difficult sort of conditions that society can place upon you and take it on your own terms, even if it's with a slightly childlike mind. Emma Stone is just incredible. I can see why there's a lot of Oscar talk about her performance, because I can't imagine any other actress taking on this. She is really challenging herself and her sort of star status with roles in this, with roles in The Curse. She does some really weird and dark things in both these projects. And that's great to see a star taking on these kind of performances. Everyone else is terrific in the cast. It looks stunning. It looks nightmarish in places, and it should. But the way it plays out is ultimately really uplifting. It's a bit of a slog at 140 odd minutes, because it does sort of travel into some really dark corners of the human mind and the human body at certain moments. But I think Poor Things is an incredible film, an incredible achievement, and unlike anything I've seen before.
Yeah, I'm super keen to see this one. It's just a match of a great director with a really interesting lead actor, where Emma Stone, I don't know if she's necessarily one of acting's greats. Like, she's certainly good and she can sort of hold her own. But what I like about her is
what she does.
I mean, She's unique and I think just charming and just like a bit of an interesting screen presence anyway. But I really do like that she really jumps from film to film. Like she doesn't just go for prestige pictures along the way. Like she just sort of mixed it up with a bit of commercial activity, bit of TV in there. Like someone of her stature doing the series The Curse, I think is kind of incredible. It just seems like she's willing to do what interests her versus sort of maybe what's necessarily best for the career.
And that's great, and that's showing in the acclaim she's getting for this film and everyone else involved with it. Even Lanthimos, who's directed these very offbeat, very sort of strange films up to now, he hasn't even with those works, he hasn't dealt into the kind of world building that he does here, and that's so it's a huge step in the right direction for him as well. It's a director challenging himself.
Look, I don't really know what's strange or weird about his previous movies, but sure, craft that narrative if you need.
Oh, they're weird. Good God. Killing of the Sacred Deer was a bizarre film. So was The Lobster. Love them all. Love them all. I'm glad he's around. So it's in cinemas now. Featured fairly heavily in the Globes nomination. Probably going to... I mean, it's not a sure thing because it's such a divisive film. So I don't know if the Oscar voters will get behind this. But in a lot of the festivals and a lot of the awards handed out already, it's featured very highly in the nominations. So we'll see.
Ho, 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 Simon. Bringing in the festive cheer is a new Netflix original. It's called Society of the Snow. Here's the plot. It's about a flight of rugby team. It's a rugby team who are on a flight. They crash on a glacier in the Andes. There's a couple of passengers who survive the crash, and they find themselves tempted by the need to survive in the most delicious way possible. Folks, here's a clip.
Pasa cuando el mundo te abandona. Cuando no tenés ropa y te estás congelando. Cuando no tenés comida y te estás muriendo.
All right, Simon, back in, I'm going to say, I don't have the year in front of me, but let's say 92, 93, there was a movie called Alive, which told the real life story of a downed plane in 1972 of a rugby team who crash landed and were forced to resort to cannibalism as a result of the fact that there was just no food available. It's the ultimate survival story where they're certainly not killing their fellow team members in order to survive, but they do need to feed on something. And so when you're there and that's all that's around, sometimes you got to make some choices. Now, I haven't seen that movie, so
really?
don't know. Yeah, well, because it came out when I was like 12 or 13. And while that sort of sounds like the sort of thing that a 12 or 13-year-old looking for their kicks might sort of chase after, it was never really billed as being like a gory, oh my God, you have to see this film sort of a production.
Exactly right.
Instead, it just... Yeah, it seems treated as respectfully as possible.
Yeah, I saw it at the movies and had it on Laserdisc, for God's sake. Remember that, kid? Look it up. Google it, kids. But it's a terrific film. Frank Marshall was the director of it. He'd come from years of producing Spielberg's popcorn movies, and suddenly he's out there with this fairly sort of challenging narrative about cannibalism in the mountains. So it was a surprise film and one that's sort of very sort of spoken of still very highly.
Yeah, well, look, I suspect that all conversations about the 90s film Alive are going to be put to the side because there's a new head chef in town and it's called Society of the Snow. This one is a foreign language movie, so obviously it's probably a little bit more... I guess, respectful of the actual people you're telling the story of. Again, it's the same story, but the difference here is it's J.A. Bayona, who's the writer-director of this. I only really know him for his work on the Jurassic World movie that he directed. Was it the second one he did? I think it was, the one that was set in like the mansion.
It was the good one. Yeah, I quite liked his version, and he's made some great films along the way. I've been a fan of his for many years now. But yeah, that was his big sort of roll of the commercial dice with the Jurassic World film.
Yeah, and look, I didn't hate that one, but it's fine, I guess. But he's probably better known in terms of actually being a talent for films like The Orphanage, What else did he do? He did something else that's notable. A Monster Calls. And The Impossible.
Yeah, which was
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's been around for a while, and he's done some prestige
But
titles as well. So
yeah, we're talking about a legitimate filmmaker here, and he's crafted one hell of a movie. So
wow.
here's the thing: everyone kind of knows this story, even if they just kind of know it as the joke of culture, which is kind of how I know the film. It opens, and they get to the business of it all pretty quickly. So they're on that flight within the first 5 minutes of the movie, and the movie does go for 2 hours something. So if you're considering the fact there's not a lot of backstory and it's really just getting people to the mountain, no, you are sitting in that snowy area for quite a while and you are going through an experience with them. That's very much what this is about. But yeah, they get onto the flight. The flight ends up going down. There's enough time to kind of get to know a couple of the characters, but not really to any sort of depth by any means. But you kind of know who characters sort of are by the time the plane goes down.
Dare I say you get a taste for them?
Simon, I would never say that. How about we treat this film with a little bit more respect than what you're offering here?
Well, let's see.
But here's the thing. As the plane goes down, I don't know if this is exactly what happened in real life, but this is certainly what's sort of shown within the film. There's air pressure, which is impacting on the plane, and so the pressure forces the plane to split in half. When that happens, and I'm no physics guy, but I can tell you the back end of the plane goes one direction with a couple of teammates, but the majority of them go the other way. But because the plane is going downwards, and because of, I guess, the various physics involved, a lot of the a lot of the plane seats are ripped out of the grounding that they're in, and they all start sort of moving forward and really rapidly just smashing into each other. What that means is that you get a whole bunch of quick shots of various limbs being snapped and people's heads slamming into stuff. And so a number of people don't make it. Well, a number of people don't make it to the ground because, it's a fairly traumatic landing, which, I certainly didn't know about that from the original movie. But anyway, so you got a few bodies that are lying on the ground as a result of that at the outset. But you've got the guys there that are there at about the 6-day mark, I want to say. And they're like, guys, this is a real issue right now. We're going to need something to eat. And so they have to make the ultimate move, which is they look at some of the meat bags that are just lying around the place, and they decide to make the move to start parceling out some meat. What I kind of liked about
very protein rich, a lot of muscle. There wouldn't be much fat on a young rugby team, so...
Well, this is kind of it. So, I mean, you kind of think for a rugby team, it must be pretty serious because most rugby teams would just be around there shitting on each other's faces and all sorts of other stuff. That's my understanding is what rugby teams get up to in the out of hours. But it's all business here. What I like about the movie is that they don't really sort of dwell too much on the actual physical act of hacking into the bodies. Instead, you're seeing the people who are just forced to maybe eat the meat, but you're not really living the life of the people who've made the decision to go out there and start cutting up the bodies and distributing the meat for their teammates.
Okay.
So
that's a bit of a difference. Let me just point out, that's a bit of a different to Alive, because in Alive there is actually scenes of Vincent Spano sort of taking... well, I don't want to get too indiscreet about this sort of stuff, but those scenes are in the 1993 film.
Yeah. And so it sort of goes from the opposite perspective, because the viewpoint on this one isn't so much that, we all know what's happening. There's no need to necessarily show that on screen. But the ethical structure that they've set up in order to be able to do this, because eating a person's flesh is not something which most people are necessarily up for. I mean, I'll do it. If you and I crash land somewhere, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I'm getting out the knife and fork from the plane and just trying to, hoe into you.
Yeah.
But for most people, this is a little... maybe. The problem is, if I wake you up while I'm sort of chopping into you, you might start giving me some movie reviews, and I don't want that. It just makes it more difficult. Yeah. But anyway, they flip the sort of narrative on it. So it's really about the decisions to be able to eat the meat. And I don't know if they do this in Alive, but when they're chopping the bodies up here, they're doing it out of view of everyone else, and they're not letting people know which body it is that they're eating. It makes it so much easier to be able to eat meat when it's just a concept, as opposed to when it's, Felipe or, long team member. Yeah.
Sure, I get it. Okay, fine.
Now, there is
Let's
one
move on from
crafty
the
thing.
eating of the bodies. Yes.
Yeah, there is one really crafty thing that happens in this movie, which is that there's a character which is more or less the main character, or it certainly develops to be the main character, a guy named Fernando, but he goes by the name Nando. And so throughout the entire movie, people are shouting out, Nando, Nando, pass me the meat, all that sort of thing going on.
Yeah.
But you hear the word Nando a lot. Now, one of my pleasures in life is a cheeky Nando's every so often, so I could not have left this movie hungrier after hearing so many references to Nando's, which I can only assume is one of the great product placements of 2023.
I was going to say, that's a great co-branding opportunity. Where's the Nando Happy Meal based on Society of the Snow? That's an excellent.
Look, really good question. I'm going to send an email to HQ and find out. Yeah, look, I think it's great. But yeah, Society of the Snow, it is a harrowing movie. Obviously, I've treated it with a fair bit of levity while discussing it here, but it is not a light and bright movie by any means. It is a Netflix production, and so you'll be able to see this one in the first week of January, so whatever the first Friday is. I want to say it's the 4th.
Yep.
Thereabouts. But if you get along to a cinema, you can see it playing in a very select number of cinemas in the lead up to its Netflix debut. I went and saw it, and this is where I'm leaving my review, which is for the last, 2 years, whenever we talk about a Netflix original movie, I'll always talk about it as being intended to be seen on the small screen, because it kind of is. It's been made to be watched that way. But they do get these big sort of cinema releases in the weeks leading into it. I feel if you are going to go to, say, Dendy Cinema Portside, for example, for one of the 2 screenings that are taking place each day, which are also the only screen in Brisbane CBD that's screening.
Only showing in Newtown here in Sydney as well.
Yeah. Again, Dendy. Yeah. Now, the problem I've got with Portside is the exact same problem I've had many times at Newtown, which is largely what's made me such a apprehensive cinema goer. At Portside, I got sent into Cinema 5, which is away from the other 4 theatres. I watched this movie on a screen that was, in terms of screen to where I was sitting in the room, which wasn't that far away from the screen, the proximity, I may have as well have just been watching it on my TV at home. It was an incredibly small screen with some incredibly patchy sound, and the projector didn't really seem like it was doing the most amazing work to get that film up on the screen. Look, it's politely, it's a fucking offense that they charged me $17.50 for that experience. And I've gone to some of those cinemas at Newtown Cinemas, and they've got some very small screens in there as well. And look, I think that if you're going to be charging people to go and see a movie, you need to offer them a better experience than they're getting at home. And the only thing I had that was better than I would have had at home is the opportunity to see a movie with a Brisbane City Council bus driver who'd skived off work and was sitting there watching a movie with me.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a good day at the movies. Well, good for you. I'm glad it went well. I was going to make a very valid point there. Oh, yes. I was going to ask, you keep mentioning, because you know it rolls me up, that as it was meant to be seen on the small screen, isn't this film in particular, unlike the next film we're going to discuss, isn't Society of the Snow a Netflix acquisition? This played all the film festivals. It was made for the big screen, but Netflix acquired it for distribution. Whereas
look,
the next
entirely
film
possible.
Yeah,
look, entirely possible. I didn't actually know that much about the background of it. I only just came across the film a couple of weeks back and just heard a really solid review, and that encouraged me to get along to go and see it. But I will say that, and look, I've had the Netflix experience of watching it on a pretty small screen, so, ultimately, I kind of feel like I'm equipped to talk about this. I think it plays perfectly well on a smaller screen. Yeah, there are some obviously sort of gorgeous backgrounds when they do eventually decide to, hey, what if we leave the plane and try and get some help? So when that part of the film takes place, you see some beautiful sort of snow backgrounds, but that's maybe 5 minutes of the movie. The rest of it's really actors standing around a plane and performing against a white background. It's, it's not the most visually arresting film, even though it is visually arresting.
Good call. All right, well, let's move on to the film everyone's talking about in one way or another. We're going to have a bit of a co-chat about Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire.
When I found you in the wreckage of that ship, I considered leaving you. I was afraid you could bring trouble to us. What do you think they want?
What is the name of this movie?
Well, it's kind of all over the shop. Is it Rebel Moon, A Child of Fire Part 1? Or is it Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire? I don't know. There's so much about this movie which is up in the air, no pun intended.
There's so much about this movie which is unwatchable. But the very beginning of the movie, as the title cards are playing, it says Rebel Moon, and then it comes up with... Sorry, what's the subtitle of this thing? It's...
A Child of Fire.
A Child of Fire. So it comes up Rebel Moon, A Child of Fire, Part 1. And if you're going to play it out that way, Zach, that means that the next movie I see needs to be Rebel Moon, A Child of Fire, Part 2. But it's actually Part 1 of Rebel Moon, and so the chapter is called A Child of Fire. Like,
I know.
He doesn't know how to do a title card, let alone make a movie.
It doesn't get things off to a great start, I got to say.
No, it doesn't. So I saw that and I was a little bit frustrated. And at this point, I was watching the movie as Zack Snyder intended, which was on my mobile phone while I was recharging my car.
Oh, Jesus.
But anyway, I started watching that and I started watching the really hacky dialogue. And there was the standard sort of Zack Snyder, hey, I know how to compose a shot, but I can't really fill that shot with anything that relates to you as a human being. There was a fair bit of that going on. And after about 10, 15 minutes of it, and during that time, I did send you a fairly snarky text message. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and watch this on the TV screen.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and watch this on the TV screen because maybe I actually do need to watch a Zack Snyder film on a bigger screen than my mobile. But I did that. It did not improve things anymore. The thing I know, and like, here's where my review is going to stop because I didn't watch past the first 40 minutes. I thought, you know what, I'm going to get back to this, and I haven't. Instead, I chose to go and pick up my daughter from daycare and then go and see a rock and roll show last night. And again, it's very early in the morning, so the extra hour and a bit that I thought I might be able to squeeze the rest of the film into got sucked up by Simon saying, hey, let's start recording now. So I missed out on some key viewing time, so I'm not going to keep on talking about the movie at all. But I will say this. The one thing I found while I was watching the movie, and struggling through the movie might be another way to phrase it, is that I really feel one of the big problems is that Zack Snyder has directed this off his own script. And I can't help but feel that this script in the hands of a talented director could have turned it into something. Or Zack Snyder directing someone else's script may also sort of yield some results. But I think that him being lost too much in his own ability to create the world that he wants, he doesn't have the maturity or sensibilities that extend beyond an 11-year-old child. And as a result, this film just sits so flat on the screen and does nothing more than sort of play the idea of... there was a cartoon... It was a comic strip. I can't remember what it was. It may have been a cartoon a couple of years ago, which was... what's it? Super Axe Cop? I think was the name of it. Mega Axe Cop, something like that. And it was created by like this 20-year-old who was just listening to the ideas of like his 8-year-old brother and just translating them directly into like this thing. So it's like filled with all the really cool, like nonsensical stuff that makes its way in that an 8-year-old might come up with. Zack Snyder's got the exact same approach to things, except instead of him talking to his younger brother, he's just listening to himself. He's listening to the inner mind, which was a fan of things like Star Wars and Magnificent Seven and all sorts of other films that he's experienced over the years. And he's just converted it all into a fevered dream as through the mind of 7-year-old Zack Snyder. Notice I kept getting him younger and younger every time I went through that then.
You're regressing, not unlike Zack Snyder does. Let me put this into perspective.
But you go for it. Tell us about the actual movie.
Okay, as a sci-fi festival director, I was quite excited to see this. As a Snyder fan, I've often defended his work, whether it be the much maligned Sucker Punch or the DC films that he made. I'm kind of a fan. I like what he does visually. With this film, he has taken a hero in the form of Sofia Boutella's Cora, who is living a life on a sort of agricultural planet, a small village on a distant planet where she's maybe moved into a second phase of her life away from a more military background. This small village is visited by what is essentially the Empire, led by Ed Skrine's Atticus Noble, a lieutenant who's a mean, horrible individual. You can tell because they're all wearing essentially spins on the nuts uniform, as you pointed out in your text to me, Dan.
You know what,
They
Simon?
take control-
I really like that at this point in the movie, Zack Snyder turns to the audience and said, hey, look, you all liked Inglourious Bastards, right? Here's the first scene interpreted by Zack Snyder.
Exactly right. Yeah. So they take over this village, do horrible things to the men who control the village, demand that in 10 weeks all their surplus, or not even their surplus crops, but all their crops are given to the Empire. And Sofia Boutella is put in a position where she fights back. So she essentially has 10 weeks to gather together a group of ne'er-do-wells who are going to help defend this small village from the might of the Empire. So you've got Star Wars, you've got the Magnificent Seven, and most of this 2.5-hour first episode, part one, Child of Fire, Rebel Moon, Zack Snyder, whatever you want to call it, is her collecting all the group of heroes that are going to play out in the second episode. Each of them gets a sort of fairly rote kind of space action bit where they're convinced to come on board while also fighting their own fights. Probably the most interesting of them is Jimon Hunsu's Titus. He's sort of living the life of this intergalactic gladiator, fighting just to survive every time, and they come and rescue him. So, and it goes on, and there's Charlie Hunnam in there who talks in this Irish accent that's really hard to understand at times, and Michael Huisman, who we know from The Flight Attendant and one of the Mike Flanagan shows on Netflix, can't remember which one. He plays one of the farmers who's along for the ride. So you basically have 2.5 hours of getting the gang together. Some of the space stuff, the big fight at the end of this episode is really well handled. It's still got that visual flair. But the problem is the dialogue here. It's so heavily handled. He feels his words, like every one, is of such importance. And whereas everything in these great sort of space adventures like Star Wars, the dialogue is kept light and snappy, or is played at such a pitch where you know you're watching an outer space western or a comic book adaptation. He plays his dialogue so heavy-handedly and with such portent that it bogs you down really terribly. I ultimately was able to say, okay, that's 2.5 hours space adventures. I didn't like the dialogue, but I quite like the visuals. The one thing that really kicked me in the nuts was that the second episode is until April 2024, and there's no way I'm going to remember any of the detail of the plotting by April 2024. So that seems like an odd choice for Netflix and Zack Snyder to make. So I'm not as down on it as the rest of the world is, but it's certainly a very minor work from a director who does much more interesting things with a bigger cinema screen.
Yeah, I just kind of wish he'd stick to movies which are just a little bit sort of down and dirty, like juvenile fare, without him sort of trying to be a little bit more pretentious and try to, elevate his work. Like that last zombie movie that he made for Netflix was...
Well, that was fun. That was the one movie that I think of his that had a bit of humour to it. There's not an ounce of lightness. There's no balance to the evil Ed Skrein character or the Empire, even the heroes of this one are kind of jerks. They're terrible people. And Sofia Boutella, who I'm a big fan of, I thought she was terrific as the Mummy in the Tom Cruise film, and she's done some great work through the years. She's a really sort of blank slate for you to hang your hero cape on, and I'm hoping she'll sort of come to the fore a little bit more in the second version. So, yeah, this one's... maybe a bit of Netflix bloat, maybe a bit of Netflix overspending, maybe, this whole thing where you give a director or a star a lot of money to go and do what they want to do just to get them under the Netflix umbrella. This could be the ultimate example of that.
Yeah, for years he was talking about this being his Star Wars, and I think at a point he was even pitching this as a Star Wars movie. God, I hope they never let him anywhere near Star Wars. That would just be... as challenging as some Star Wars productions can be, boy, that would be something. Anyway, Simon, I think we need to move on. We've already spent more time thinking about this than I care to.
Shall we jump straight into the intermission?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's intermission time.
I came up with this one. I'm going to take the lead on the intermission this week, which I'm very excited about. We're going to keep this nice and tight because it's about looking into the future. I've called this one 4 films that imagine 2024 because the new year's just a few moments away. So I thought I'd take a look at 4 films from our distant past, one as far back as 1960, that sort of envisioned what the world would look like in 2024 and see if any of them got it right. What do you think, Dan Barrett? Is this a go? We can make something out of this, can't we?
I mean, you might be able to. I don't know. I mean, I've seen one of the 4 movies you've... Actually, no, I've seen 2 of the movies, but one of them I don't remember in the slightest. But go for it. We'll see what I can contribute.
All right. First one, we're going to go all the way back to 1960. It's a B-movie sci-fi... anti-classic, I guess you could say. This is available to see on YouTube in a fairly glorious black and white. It's called Beyond the Time Barrier. In this film, an experimental pilot flies into the future and ends up in 2024 in a city with people who are first suspicious of him as being a spy of some kind, but who want to keep him to procreate with the ruler's daughter because the majority of the inhabitants are sterile. Jesus Christ, really? Wow. That's pretty heavy for a B. So is that anything like 2024, Dan Barrett?
Well, I mean, I don't know that we know for sure. I mean, a lot can happen between now and the next 12 months.
That's true. Maybe we will all go sterile by then. All the screen watching, the radiation will turn us to shriveled raisins down there. Who knows? All right. A Boy and His Dog is the next movie. This is from 1975. This film opens with the title card, World War IV lasted 3 days. There's a great saying that says the next World War will not determine who is right, but who is left. And I think that says a lot. That is sort of the basis for this film. A very young Don Johnson, he of Miami Vice fame, plays a young man who wanders a post-apocalyptic wasteland with, wait for this, his telepathic dog. Will we have telepathic dogs in 2024? Dan Barrett.
Look, I'm not sure that I really want my dogs knowing what I'm thinking about. I don't think they'd be happy.
Or us knowing what dogs think. Maybe they're not our best friends.
I mean, I know what the dogs are thinking. They are pretty obvious most of the time.
Walk, food, poo. Walk, food, poo.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's pretty much what I think too at my age, so... All right, the third film in this riveting intermission is called Highlander 2: The Quickening. The year is 2024. Connor McLeod, played by that he of the great forehead, what's his name? Christophe Lambert. He regains his youth and his immortal abilities and must free the Earth from the Shield, an artificial ozone layer that's fallen under the control of a corrupt corporation. Will we have a fake... Remember back in the 90s when we were really worried about the ozone layer? I think that problem's have been solved. But in this film, it's a ozone layer that has been artificially constructed, and Connor McLeod, foregoing all the mythology of the first Highlander film, has to do something about it. Will we return to the world of the ozone layer issues in 2024, Dan Barrett?
Look, it seems pretty unlikely. This is a film which I remember really rating a lot when I was a kid, but I've never actually watched it as an adult, and I'm very apprehensive about seeing it because I am almost certain it's not going to hold up in any possible way. But I do like the idea of watching the far-off future. Virginia Madsen, as I recall, is the female lead in it. That sounds pretty fun. Maybe I should give it a go. There is the Renegade edition, which is I guess it's a director's cut, which has been streaming around the place lately. Like, maybe I should give that a look.
I think I will. I watched it once back in the day. I thought it was awful, but it was a film. Australian director Russell Mulcahy thought he was onto something by taking the Highlander 2 gig. He had the film taken away from him in the edit suite. The Money Men hacked it all together and introduced this sort of artificial intelligence ozone layer kind of thing. And it's widely regarded as one of the worst sequels ever made. But if there's a Renegade edition and the fans have got hold of it and made something good out of it, maybe I will check that out.
Well, it's not the fans. It's coming from a studio somewhere.
Really, I don't know if Mulcahy ever did another cut of it. I'm going to look into that because I love the first Highlander, but remember hating the second one, so it's definitely probably worth a look. And
Also,
finally,
did he not direct the first? Did he not direct the first one as well?
yes, he did. Yeah,
Yeah.
he did. Russell Mulcahy.
Okay, sorry. As you were.
He did good work. He still does good work. He's doing a lot of television over there. Yeah, I'm a Facebook friend with him. Anyway, I digress. The 13th Floor is the fourth film in our visiting the cinematic landscape that is 2024. This film actually spends a lot of its time in the 1930s, but towards the end of the film, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, and by now you really should have, it came out in 1999, our hero awakens in 2024 to find that his life as sort of a private eye, hard-boiled sort of gumshoe in the 1930s is an entire VR simulation, virtual reality. Has been plugged into his neuro sensors into his spinal cord, and he's lived the life of a private detective in the 1930s, all while sitting in a chair in 2024. This movie I thought was really good and was both accused of being and also regarded as one of the better Matrix sort of rip-offs that came in the wake of The Matrix, or came out at the same time as The Matrix. We were all sort of looking to what the technology of the future was going to look like. And virtual reality was kind of a thing for a while. So maybe this has gotten the closest to what 2024 is really like. Not plugging into our literal nerve center, but that can only be a matter of weeks away, can't it?
Yeah, so look, this film did come out in 99, so it's not like it's a rip-off of The Matrix. It's just, had the misfortune of coming out roughly around the same time. Also, Existence, the Cronenberg film, has a similar VR story taking place about the same time. I remember, here's the thing, and I don't like talking about this too much because it's one of these things where history has not really been on my side on this one. I wasn't that crazy about The Matrix when it came out, and I've never actually been that crazy about it since, but I really remember liking this movie.
Yeah, I remember liking this movie, and I never saw it at the cinema. This was a VHS sort of evening watch for me, but I remember it quite fondly. Gretchen Mol, I think, was the lead actor, and Craig Bierko, who we just don't hear much of nowadays. This was his shot at leading man stardom as well.
Yeah, look, I'm a big Gretchen Mol fan. Always have been.
Always have been. All right, so there you get a look into the world of 2024 as imagined by movies of the last few decades. I'd definitely check out Beyond the Time Barrier, which is all over Netflix. I think A Boy and His Dog is too. So enjoy. Happy New Year, everyone. Look out for all those developments in 2024.
And just to update people on the last segment there, the Highlander 2 Renegade Edition, apparently Russell Mulcahy released his director's cut in 95, and that was known as the Renegade Edition, and that has subsequently become the main version of the film that's available, because the original theatrical cut did not have enough demand to warrant further production for home media. That said, I've only ever seen the original cut. So
I wonder if the
Renegade
would Renegade be all over the YouTube? I don't know. We'll have to check that out.
Look, I haven't looked it up, but I'm pretty certain I saw it on 7+ a couple of weeks ago.
No way. Really?
Way.
The Renegade cut's available for streaming. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dan Barrett, what else have you been watching?
Look, I've been watching a few things. So primarily my rewatch of LA Law continues. Midway through season 3 at the moment. Now, I didn't know she was going to be in the program, but I also knew that I would see her at some point cropping up in the program. But in one of the most recent episodes I saw, Terry Hatcher, star of Lois and Clark and Desperate Housewives, she cropped up because through the late 80s going into the early 90s, she was one of these casting it girls. If there was a TV show around, like, she was definitely making an appearance somewhere in it. And this one was, it didn't seem that far a stretch from her Seinfeld appearance as the lady with the potentially fake buzzies, but they're real and are spectacular.
Yes, they were.
This was her as a former playmate who had taken to spending time at a nudist colony. anyway, she was attracting the wrong sorts of people there, and there was a legal case regarding that. But she is introduced into the episode in a very Austin Powers style, hey, here's a fair bit of nudity, but with all the bits hidden by strategically placed things around the room. Anyway,
I've got to
very
check that
funny.
out. That sounds like a lot of fun. Oh, good one.
Yeah.
Terry Hatcher.
Huge fun. So anyway, I watched that.
Face to face, I interviewed Terry Hatcher when she came out here to promote Coraline. She was the voice of the mother in that Henry Selick animated film. And yeah, she was very sweet and very funny and was happy to talk about the film, but also just riff on anything. So she was, I remember she was delightful and certainly very beautiful. Yes, she is spectacular.
Yeah, look.
So
I love Terry Hatcher so much, but also my understanding is she's a complete nightmare to work with and just
I've heard the same thing.
Worst.
Yeah.
But anyway, the other thing I saw, Simon, which has a bit more sort of weight to it, I went to the movies during the week and saw a film called Batman Returns.
At the movies?
At the movies, at this picture house. Sometimes they play older movies, and because it's Christmas time, at the moment, Palace... Yeah, but Palace are playing Christmas movies every night at 6 o'clock leading into Christmas. I believe that tonight at my local Palace, they're screening It's a Wonderful Life, which they screen across 2 nights. 2 separate screenings, like you don't see the first half and then have to come back the next night. It's not that sort of movie. Sure. It's not It's a Wonderful Life, A Child of Fire, Part 1, which is a shame. But anyway, they played Batman Returns. So I haven't watched it maybe in like 5 to 10 years thereabouts, but I've seen the film a whole bunch of times. So, I'm very familiar with it. I saw it in the cinema as a kid in 92. My memory of leaving it was my dad rubbishing the penguins at the very end and talking about how the movie was ridiculous and trashing it. And I remember just quietly thinking, I think that was amazing. And I sat there and I was watching it, and I don't know, I kind of think the film's a little bit amazing. I don't think it's like, as a movie, like there's certainly flaws with it. The pacing is very strange. Like, there's no acts 1, 2, and 3. It's really just act 1 that just kind of keeps on continuing. Like, there's no real sort of variation in plot evolution. Like, it's kind of what's there at the very beginning just is what rides it out for you. But what I really like about it is that it's actually really quite adult. Like, it's a fairy tale movie in the way that Tim Burton movies are. But there's something about the script from Heather's writer, Daniel Walters, who co-did the story but then actually did the screenplay, where he just doesn't seem afraid at all to start taking some very sort of adult wordplay. There's the sequence where they're at the Max Schreck masquerade ball towards the very end of the movie, and oh gosh, I'm trying to think of what the actual sort of phrasing is. There's a little bit of a flirtatious back and forth between Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle, who are dancing on the floor. But anyway, as there's some sort of joke about him having a semi-erection while dancing with her or something, and it's like fairly overt, and I just kind of thought I didn't really expect to see this in a Warner Brothers Batman live-action film.
Well, I mean, as someone whose mobile phone wall photo is late 80s, early 90s Michelle Pfeiffer, a Catwoman has never looked so has never been so captured so perfectly as Selena Kyle's, as Michelle Pfeiffer, Selena Kyle. She's extraordinary in this.
No, Simon, incorrect. The greatest Catwoman is Julie Newmar. Look, I love Michelle Pfeiffer in this movie. I think she's great, but Julie Newmar is especially fantastic as Catwoman, and there's never been anyone better than her. Also, if you want to talk about Catwoman... No, Simon, you don't know what you're talking about here. But the other thing is that if you are going to talk... Simon, if you are going to talk about Catwoman and use the word perfect, you are legally obligated to say perfect. You can't just say perfect.
That's very
so
true.
Look,
all right, so it holds up.
You've been schooled now. Let's move on.
It has been doing the rounds. It played at the Astor Theatre down in. Oh no, it played at ACMI through the Cinemaniacs team in Melbourne just a couple of weeks ago. So Batman Returns is getting a bit of retro love on the big screen, which is great to see. I should watch it again. It's so
also, Simon, a better Christmas movie than Die Hard. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and my God, they're also screening Love. They're not screening Love Actually again in Brisbane, are they?
Oh yeah, that always gets a place somewhere. I don't know. It's part of the same run of films, but yeah. Also, I'm just going to say, if you're going to look for 80s actioners that you're just trying to pass off as Christmas movies, Lethal Weapon, it's a much more pure Christmas movie than Die Hard is, but whatever. Simon, what have you been watching?
I went along to the preview screening, the premiere here in Sydney of Anyone But You. This is the new Sony Pictures romantic comedy starring It Girl Sydney Sweeney and Mr. Pex, Glenn Powell, who you know from Top Gun Maverick and a couple of other things. The rom-com is a tough genre to pull off. It's largely disappeared from the big screen and has become the realm of the small screen filmmaker nowadays. Anyone But You is trying to resurrect the big screen experience, the rom-com experience that we all enjoyed. I guess it kind of peaked for the 80s through the 90s when the Julia Roberts and the Meg Ryans of the world were dominating the screen. Anyone But You fails terribly. It's directed by Will Gluck. Good name, Will. And he has done some good work in the past. Easy A was a pretty terrific film. Yeah, exactly, yeah. But his other stuff, Friends with Benefits, have been fairly middle-of-the-road type of uninspired rom-coms. And with this one, he finds two stars which certainly look the part on screen. They're both beautiful people, but they're kind of lacking in chemistry. And those sort of extreme character moments that make rom-coms work, and by that I'm saying that terrible scene in My Best Friend's Wedding where they all sit around and sing that song in the restaurant. Nobody does it in real life, but it kind of works in a rom-com world. There are a lot of those that just don't play out in Anyone But You. It's actually got some good reviews coming out of America, but I can tell you the mood in the cinema when we watched this was fairly dire, and the mumblings as the film sort of groaned to an end was that this is not playing well with this audience. This was despite Sydney Sweeney and Will Gluck and Brian Brown and a couple of the support players being there to introduce the film. She's tiny in real life, certainly very lovely, speaks with a very thick American accent, which was a little bit hard to understand when she introduced the film, but her few minutes in front of the screen was a whole lot more enchanting than anything that happened for the next 100 minutes on the screen. So Anyone But You is in cinemas on December 26th and not really worth your time. Good streaming movie, and they're going to not want me saying that. But you know what else I watched, Dan? Are you a rom-com fan? You enjoy a rom-com. Do you sit down with your wife and watch a bit of a rom-com every now and again?
Look, no. I mean, sorry, just briefly. I got invited to a media screening like this. The cast weren't there. Because heaven forbid that, they come to Brisbane and not Sydney. But, I suppose there's like 3 people that work in the media in Brisbane, so I get it. But I do think that Sydney Sweeney is genuinely a star. Okay, yes. And even if she isn't really... I don't know if she's necessarily quite broken through 100% yet, where my mum probably knows who she is, but like it's on the cusp. Like she just kind of feels like she is a couple of roles away like from films like this to just cutting through that mainstream in a really big way. Like there's something about her which, I just think is just, I mean, she's an attractive lady, but like it's more than that. Like she's got that sort of indescribable star quality.
Have you seen her? Just let me jump in there quickly. Have you seen her as the woman in the Cadillac in the latest Rolling Stone music video? She literally sort of cruises around LA, gyrating in the backseat of a soft top car while Mick and the boys burst out their latest song. It's quite a scene, man.
Wait, she's in the back of the car? Are they driving?
No. No, they're too old. They're not allowed to drive. No, they're all on.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Sunset Boulevard, Boulevard, singing their latest song. It's a terrific clip, and she really sort of va-va-vums it up in there, and she's copping a bit of flack for sort of. There was an article suggesting that she, put feminism back 100 years by doing this kind of rock music video vixen, but she said, "No way! I felt great doing it. I'm gyrating in a topless car to." Mick Jagger song. This is what I want to do with my life. So screw you, the rest of you. So good luck with that. So, I think she's
good on her.
Sorry, I interrupted what you were going to say.
To answer your question, occasionally a rom-com sort of thing will play in the household, but it's not really like it's a preferred genre within the house. And I'm not against the rom-com. I've, had plenty of, rom-com experience in the past. I was actually fairly interested in seeing this film because I like her and it looked fairly sort of, inoffensive enough to get along to.
Yeah, maybe it'll play well with the summer crowds. Sydney looks lovely in it, I should say. Both Sydneys. The other one that I watched, and this one was a cinema release for a while, but had been bumped to the Paramount Plus channel. It's called Finest Kind. This has a terrific cast: Ben Foster, Tommy Lee Jones, the other it girl at the moment, Jenna Ortega, and young Aussie, or born in London, but young Aussie actor Toby Wallace. It's the story of a fishing community in upstate East Coast America, all talk with the big accents like that. Ben Foster's the captain of the boat. Toby Wallace is his younger brother who has an opportunity to create a life for himself elsewhere, but also wants to be on the ship. Tommy Lee Jones is the haggard old fisherman father who lends the boat. They're pulling in a great haul, decide to just cross over into Canadian waters briefly and get caught doing that. The ship gets impounded, so all of a sudden they're $100,000 on the hook for the fine, which gives the opportunity for the local drug runner to come along and say, hey, I'll pay you $100,000 if you bring a whole bunch of heroin up the river for me. And from that, terrible things ensue. This is a Brian Helgeland film who won the Oscar for LA Confidential, has done some really good work over the year, very much divided into a family drama in the first half and a crime story and a crime thriller in the second half. Doesn't always gel perfectly well, but it's a very authentic look at this sort of fishing community and fishing life and the family dynamics that are torn apart by how things develop. So I can see why it got bumped from the cinema, because it sort of stumbles a bit in the character department, but as a good old-fashioned bit of melodrama, it kind of works really well, and it's on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, I kind of miss seeing this sort of film in the cinema a bit, so I might give this a look.
Me too. That's exactly what I thought, yeah. Yeah, I thought that as well. Christmas Day, 1973, December 25. Just for those who don't know. The year's eventual Best Picture winner, starring the decade's two biggest male stars, that might start a fight, was released. Can you name the film? 1973.
I'm just going to assume that this is... oh, gosh, why have I forgotten the name of the film? Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Butch Cassidy.
Yes, it was. No, it wasn't that film, but they were the two stars, Redford and Newman, in their second pairing, The Sting.
Right.
There you go. No, Butch Cassidy was a late 60, 68 or 69.
See, I was
December 28.
I knew it wasn't right year-wise.
Yeah. December 28, 1949. God, look, we are going back. Studio giant 20th Century Fox announces it will be moving into which exciting new sector of the entertainment industry?
I don't know, new sector, makes me think, it's too early for them to be moving into television. So, I don't know, maybe colour cinema? I don't know.
No, colour cinema been around for a while. No, it was television. They started into the world of television production.
TV. Okay.
Yeah.
I can never really work out with TV, when people were making stuff.
And finally, December 31, listen to this, 1929. For the first time, the BBC uses what iconic British sound as its station ID. This is a little off the screen watching path because obviously this isn't screen watching. This is their radio ID, but they went on to use it on the television as well. What iconic British sound as its station ID?
I mean, it violates everything about what we do here. Every single thing. Was the station ID based? Was the ID based around Big Ben?
Yes, the chiming of Big Ben. Well done, sir.
Okay, cool. Well, at least I got one of them right. I guess that allows me permission to move into the birthday quiz.
No, not happy birthday. No, not that. Please, no, not happy birthday.
I've tweaked the format a little bit here just so we can get on board with the whole seasonal merriment, the festive season joy. So I've chosen 4 birthdays from across the year, and you've got to guess what they all have in common. Ready for this? 13th of June, 1953.
Sorry, Simon.
Tim Allen.
Have
yes, sir.
Having looked at the names, sorry, do you not think very much of me? Do you think I'm simple?
You don't really want me to answer that in the middle of the podcast, do you?
Sorry, give me your films. Who is it? Tim Allen, who's... Okay.
13th of June, 1953, won Tim Allen. 4th of August, 1955, Billy Bob Thornton. 9th of August, 1985, won Anna Kendrick. That's a bit of a bolter. And 26th of September, 1877, an actor named Edmund Gwenn. Now, what could these four actors possibly have in common? The clue being we're right in the middle of the festive season. What's the answer?
Could it be that they all played Santa Claus at some point? So you've got the Santa Claus with Tim Allen. You've got Bad Santa with Billy Bob. You've got, I can't think of the name of the movie. It was something like Nancy Claus or something like that.
I like that. I want to watch that movie. No, it was called Noel with Anna Kendrick, which we watched last night.
Oh, Noel.
And it's quite a fun, nice movie, yes. Noel with Anna Kendrick. Good. Now, here's your big one. Who's Edmund Gwenn?
Like, I'm guessing that he played Santa in, like, Miracle on 34th Street or something like that.
He's considered the greatest screen Santa of all time. Edmund Gwenn was the original Kris Kringle in Miracle on 34th Street all those years ago. So Merry Christmas, everyone. If you're listening to this at the appropriate time, it will be right in the middle of the festive season. What sort of a family gathering wouldn't be complete without all gathering around the Motorola phone and listening to Motorola phone? Where'd that come from? And listening to the Screen Watching Christmas podcast. Happy Christmas, Dan.
Yeah, happy Hanukkah to you, and
Feliz Navidad to all our Latino listeners.
Indeed. Simon Foster, I think it's time that we get out of here. Folks, this has been the end of Screen Watching for 2023 for Simon and I, but not for you because we have episodes in the can to get us through this festive period. Over the next week, you'll hear some of the fine opinions of Simon and myself as we go through the top 10 TV shows of 2023. We're really getting ahead of this, getting on the gun. Best TV shows of the last year. We're doing another podcast, which... wait for it, people. Okay. Gird your loins. Best movies of the past year. And then also Simon recorded a little interview as well, which we're going to drop that. Maybe even on Christmas Day. I'll see how the editing process goes to get that out into the world.
Perfect.
But anyway, folks, in the notoriously slowest week of the podcasting season, and it's notoriously slow because nobody listens to podcasts at all during the week. It is our heaviest week. There is going to be so many podcasts coming through, but what we won't have is a regular episode coming next week. So don't listen out for that because it's just not coming. But we will be back the first week of January with some more screen watching.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for a fun year. Thank you, Dan Barrett. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and yours, my friend. See you in 2024.
We'll see you then. In the first podcast back, we're going to do our predictions for the year ahead. So tune in for that, folks. We'll see you then.